What is up, YouTube? I'll tell you what's up. The SV6 has not missed a beat, and I haven't done a video for a while. So we're going to do some mods. The first mod we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to put a front over the radiator air induction system, and we're also going to do an exhaust system from the engine all the way back. Now the thing with the SV6, the LFX motor, is a very funny head design. There's no exhaust manifold. This is basically what you get. That is your extractors with a cap built in. We've gone for the 100 cell high flow cap, and we've gone for this, the 2.5 inch stainless X4 system, completely made in China. Now unfortunately Australia Post seem to have lost one of my deliveries, which is the air induction system. So when we get the air induction system, install that, and the full exhaust on the car will then give it a complete engine tune. Now these things from the factory will come out with 205 kilowatts. It's fairly warranty friendly. They've got a very strong bottom end. It's a very strong motor from top to bottom. When they throw these engines in Cadillacs and Camaros, they will get 230 kilowatts out of this engine just as it is, just on tuning alone. So we're going to pick up quite a bit of power once we've done the whole kit and caboodle. Now I've never done an air induction system before on a fuel injected car. I've thrown shiny air filters on carburetted cars. I've stuck in K&N air filters. I've never really seen the point of it until this man showed me.
You're listening to Donk Wars. Here's your host, Alex Jones. When air heats up, which is made of gases, they expand. And when air cools down, they contract. Now you will have seen this phenomenon if you've ever looked up in the sky and seen a hot air balloon. With a big difference in temperature inside the balloon and outside the balloon, the combined weight of the balloon and the basket and the people it's carrying, it displaces more air than it weighs. So the balloon goes up. Now the globalists, they don't want you to know these secrets. They want to keep you down. But I shouldn't be talking about hot air balloons. I should be talking about cold air induction over the radiator and the internal combustion engine. And that's why the backyard bush mechanic's so much better at this than I am, because I tend to go off my own little digressions and tangents. He's honestly thousands of times better at this than I am, and that's why I need Brain Plug. 50% off, and if you order today, free delivery anywhere in the planet, in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe. In fact, any dimension, free delivery. Anyway, back to cold air induction. Using a simple equation, we can calculate a percentage increase in the number of oxygen molecules in a given decrease in temperature. If we are to assume that your average stock standard factory fitted air intake is only taking air from inside the engine bay, and that air inside an engine bay being heated up by a hot engine was, let's say, at 45 degrees Celsius or 318.15 Kelvin. Now, if we had to move this air intake over the radiator, drawing air from outside, and we would be able to cool that down to 25 degrees Celsius or 298.15 Kelvin, and using this simple equation, we can work out that there's going to be 6.7% more oxygen molecules inside your combustion chambers. But see, the globalists, they don't want you to know this. George Soros doesn't want you to know this. They want you to keep slugging around little pus boxes with all the goblins. But see, the modern car has a computer, and it has oxygen sensors. It has a MAF sensor, maximum air flow sensor, and that tells the computer how much air is actually going into your engine. And it's got an O2 sensor on the exhaust side that tells you how much oxygen is coming out of the engine. And then the engine's computer says, hey, there's more oxygen in here, I can put more fuel in. So when your car's burning more fuel, it's going to make more power. And a lot of time the manufacturers, like of the Commodore in this case, and the Chevy SS, they put the airbox to the side of the engine. And a lot of air intake manifolds have their air intake at the front of the engine. And that means the air's got to take some twists and turns to get into the front of the manifold. And although it doesn't look like it, air does like to go in a straight line. Although with Brownian motion, the smaller a molecule gets, the less it is bound by its own inertia, it still likes to go in a straight line. And when air is flowing and has to take a tight turn, there will be turbulence on the exit of the corner on the inside. This will slow air down, and with an engine, you want good airspeed. And with an over-the-radiator induction system, we're going to maximize airspeed and minimize temperature. And that's the science behind over-the-radiator induction systems. And don't forget, folks, if you order today, free delivery and 50% off Brain Plug at Dunk Wars.
So there you go. I hope you learnt heaps. Sometimes it's good to go back to school. Now, what I love about the SV6 is it's quiet. In fact, you could put a dead person in the back seat and just drive around, and you'll hear more out of the dead person in the back than you will out of the engine. Now, by doing the mods we're going to do, we're going to undo all that. And this is no longer going to be a quiet Holden. Now, I've read a lot on the forums that people just say, just buy a V8, why do up the V6? You'll never catch the V8, etc., etc. And they seem to think you're being a bit of an idiot if you modify a V6, and you probably are. But back in the 70s, there was something called the E49 Charger, and it was the fastest production 6-cylinder car made in Australia. It had a quarter mile time of 14.2 seconds, that's what they claim. This car has got a quarter mile time of 14.6 seconds, that's what Holden claimed. Now, I can't have an old 70s Charger beating me in a quarter mile time. I have to beat the E49 Charger, and that's what this is about. Now, I did say that this is a quiet car, but if you do want to put the foot down and hear a bit of that 6-cylinder symphony, if that's what you call it, you can do so. These come out with driver assist, so there's 2 stages that you can turn it off. It's got a traction control at stage automatically defaulted, so if you put the foot down, you're not going to spin or anything like that. Then you hit the traction control or driver's assist button, it'll turn off the first stage, and you'll get a little bit of traction loss at the back if you want, or you can just turn it completely right off. Navigate around the corner because there's a learner driver in. Now, what I want to show you is how this thing takes off in its current state with just a K&N air filter. We've got the first stage of driver assist off, so if the car was powerful enough, we can lose a bit of traction, and you can see how it goes. Now, I don't know if you heard that properly, if the sound come through, but the car is capable of losing a bit of traction on the takeoff, which it did. It's got a nice bit of pickup, but it can't keep up with the E49 Charger. So once we get our delivery from Australia Post, we're going to put our over-the-radiator air induction system. It's a mouthful to say now, I know why people say OTR. And then we'll do another takeoff. I don't expect much difference at all in power, especially from a standing start, because there's not going to be much difference in air temperature and there's no air ram effect. What I do think there will be from the get-go is a nice induction noise. So under acceleration, I think it might sound a little bit different. You might hear a little bit more of the induction. And then we'll put the exhaust on, and I don't expect much improvement from that either. I expect, obviously, there's going to be a difference in sound. I expect the real power gains to come once we do the tune. It's here. There's no point being here. It's got to be on there. So let's do it. Step 2, we're going to remove all this. I'm going to disconnect the battery. Now, you may have noticed that I skipped step 1, because that's because we skipped step 1, and if you watch another YouTube channel, you should know what step 1 is. We don't need to do that. I'm just going to get the top of the airbox off with the hose clamp and the little clips, the air filter out, just to give me a clearer view of the screws underneath that are holding it in. I haven't bothered reading the instructions because, well, a man hasn't got any pride if he needs the guide, so we're just going to do this. We're just going to get this guy out with a couple of screws. There's a little plastic sort of cable tie thing here which will cut off. That's your MAF sensor right there, and that's going to go into the new induction system. There's a couple more cable ties to cut just to free this top of the airbox. That should be in. Now I can only see this little tool bit here and 2 bolts on there, and maybe a couple more. I'm going to undo them and see what comes up. Unclip this little red thing. It should pull up with a bit of a wrestle. Put the red thing back on. You might be playing with things in that little gap anymore. And there's going to be a hole down there to your wheel well. There's a trim coming on the way. It hasn't arrived yet, but it's the least of our worries. That's nothing an ice cream lid and a bit of duct tape wouldn't fix anyway. But we're going to have that looking brand new and like it was meant to be there. Now it looks like we've just got a couple of things left holding it. One is this vacuum hose, and it looks like it's just a simple of, there's a little catch in here that's hooking onto it, and it seems to sort of wedge it on, so it looks like a case of pulling that, pushing it forward, and then pulling back. Job done. Now it looks like all that's left to take this big front piece off is just the hose clamp. I was right. Okay, I'll put that over there in case I need the hose clamps. It looks like they've done the right thing by me. They've given me a little bit of rubber tube, hose clamp, and this MAF sensor is going to go into this slot here, and it cannot fail. It's like Lego. But I found something really interesting. This thing comes with a cup holder. That's perfect in case you want to have a beer while you work. It's sort of everything. I thought of everything, but they only gave me one hose clamp, and I think you need 2. Now what I should do is put the bolt with the hose clamp so it's right up underneath so no one can get at it. And I think it's easier to put the MAF sensor in while it's out. So that's what I'm going to do next. Grab my screws. Give it a good screw. Screw them with a towel underneath, because if you drop them, hopefully the towel catches them. Now let that be a lesson to you. If you're smart, you can actually undo the plug. Then you've got to take it out there, screw it, you know, with the screws down the engine bay. But that's why I'm a backyard bush mechanic. So I'm going to get this hose clamp off in case I need it. I'm going to get that one off in case I need it. Because it looks like I'm missing one. I'm going to check the box as well. Maybe I should check the box first. Nope. Definitely not one in the box. That deserves a $50 credit. The brackets there. I hope they don't show up. This will look really good because it's nice OEM plastic. If you get to see these ugly brackets there, be a shame. Guess what I reckon? I reckon that's got to come off. I reckon I've got to back to front. I ain't going to read the instructions. No sir. There's the instructions. Stickers. My fridge is going to have a cane in. Alright, so I think I figured out it goes that way. The instructions don't even give that part. Nothing actually good for this. Silicone lube. It should go on easier, but it's going to make the wrestle harder, if that makes sense, because my hands are going to slip all over the place. I've got a feeling I should put these brackets on first. I'm going to put the brackets on first. Just going to undo a couple of top screws in the radiator. What's nice is we've got the nut in the other side embedded into the plastic, so it just sort of holds it nicely. So you don't have to be a talented octopus, fingers behind there and everything else. You just push it and thread it and on it goes. The V8's got to tilt the radiator, do it left and right, give it a secret handshake. This thing just bolts straight on. So much easier than a V8. It's time to see if we can get this on. I reckon it's going to be a case of on and off, just to stretch the rubber a bit. There goes my hose clamp down the front. This one's going to be harder side, I reckon, than the other one. And we've got that on, and I remembered to leave the hose clamp on there. Now when they say bolt on, I've got a bit of an air conditioning plug that's interfering with this, and it won't sit properly. So I'm going to have to think. Now I'm going to do this side up first. I think this lines up okay. And then I'm going to try and swivel this one around and see if I can get it into a nice position where it will actually work. I think that fits, but they gave me 3 clips, 3 screws and 2 brackets. That's $100 credit. Let me check the box. This is a wrestle. You get that in position and the hose pops off. I'm just going to do the hose up so I can manipulate it without it flying off. Well, it's on there, but I don't like it. And what you've got to do is wrestle this hose back on so it's right up to the end there, but it really doesn't want to go there. Make sure you've got that stuff. Those screws we put in, we'll take them out again because it's got to put the filter in now. And those screws got to come out every time. It's a bit of a pain in the butt compared to changing the old K&N. You know what I was thinking? I reckon if you own one of these, an SV6 or any other Commodore 6-cylinder, with the exception of the VL turbo, and you paid someone to supply and fit your modifications, you really are an idiot. Because doing something like this will put you in touch with the car's spirit animal, if you're into that sort of thing. In this case it's the lion, so you're not going to get the pure experience unless you do it yourself. And if you can pay someone, buy a V8. Next we put in the filter. That squeezes in nicely. What you should do with the filter is always check that there's no, especially the K&Ns because they're made out of a wire, so just make sure none of it's loose and none of it's going to fray or anything like that before you put it in. Very rarely they do have some frayed wires, which you don't want going into your air intake. And then we'll put the lid back on. Should be ready to start it up. Put the vacuum hose on. Just push it on, just clicks. Now at the beginning of this video I actually lied. I said I've never installed a cold air induction before. Now at a VK Commodore, which had a over the radiator little tray, fiberglass, that used to have the air filter in here. But technically they called that a cold air intake. So if there's any difference between an induction and an intake, I don't know. So Brocky was ahead of his time. All you had to do is put a couple of little magnets there and you had the Energy Polarizer 5000. I just discovered something. Take these 4 bolts out, install these 2 first, and then do these 4 last. Makes a big difference. That's it, all fitted. Now what I don't really like about this is that there's flex. I would like it to be a bit more rigid and a little bit more precise in its fitting. But if you go the right way, which is these 2, take all these 4 out when you're putting this in, do these 2 first, put those 4 in, tighten those 4 up and then tighten these 4 up, 2 last. I don't know if I made sense then, but it made sense to me. Now all we got to do is connect the battery back up and hope the computer doesn't say no. I almost forgot, we've got to cut this rubber a 50 centimetre length so that it roughly lines up with that. just having a look to see if any of the hose popped off. So the hose is on there still as I left it, which is good. Does it go better? I don't think so. I don't expect, even with the exhaust, for it to go any better, because they sort of have target peak horsepower, and once they reach them, they just won't give you any more unless they're programmed to do so. So I think it's the tune-up that's going to make a big difference. But you could tell the more you drove it, the computer was getting used to it. At first it was a little bit doggy, then it picked up to where it was before. It definitely makes a noise when you give it a bootful. Whether I like it or not, I don't know. It just sounds a little bit futuristic. It's hard to describe. Well, let's see how we go. Well, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you very much for watching. In the next video, I'm going to be doing a full exhaust from the engine back, and we're going to see what sort of a sound we can get out of the SV6. Don't forget, click like and subscribe and all that stuff that you do on YouTube.